Welcome to All Villa, No Filler. Remember to subscribe to the show, follow us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, ESPN FC analyst, Luis Miguel Echegaray. He's a man who's got a lot of expertise about the mighty Aston Villa and wider football. So what a pleasure it is to have you back on the show, Luis Miguel.
Frankie, it's so good to see you. I love your purple background. It's amazing. It's like you're in a 1980s disco. I love it.
Yeah, that's the theme I go for. It's kind of like Scarface or something. Al Pacino will be walking in a few days' time, having a party tonight. But look, we're here to chat about the mighty Villa. We're just a couple of days away from the big opening day of the season, the Claret and Blue derby against West Ham. How are you feeling about the upcoming season for Aston Villa?
Well, obviously the season enters in a sea of optimism, right? Cautious optimism, I guess. Everything that happened with Unai Emery's Villa last season, making it to the Champions League for the first time since, 82, 83, of course. And, making that top four spot was a monumental achievement. So with that comes so much great energy and love and optimism for any Villa fan to come into this season. However, because of the nature and the environment of the Premier League, specifically with the sustainability rules and meeting financial regulation, Villa, like many other clubs, have had to balance the books and balance the realities of what the squad is going to look under Unai Emery. That's precisely why Monchi arrived to Villa. That's precisely why Damir Videgani works so hard as well behind the scenes, and why Wes Edens and Nasser Sawiris are looking to be cautiously optimistic and also with a lot of ambition. So with that question that you just gave me, my answer does come with a complexity, because a Villa fan should be optimistic about what's happening. There's a lot to look forward to, because at the end of the day, the most important person to focus on is the man in charge, and that's Unai Emery. But I am cautiously wary about how this Villa side is going to do in brand new territory, completely new territory, right? Where you're going to be playing Champions League football, right? At the same time as making sure that you balance the Premier League, the domestic cup competitions, and everything else. And with the outgoings that happened this summer, that I'm sure we're going to be talking about, and the incomings that have happened, there's so much to decipher. So there's optimism, 100%. That's never, ever going to die. But there has to come a level of realism as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think we have to have the realism that this could be a bit of a transitional phase, at least for the first few weeks of the season. But you mentioned the transfers there. Do you think Villa's first 11 today, or against West Ham, I guess, is stronger than the first 11 we put out towards the end of last season?
Oh, that's a really good question, because in many ways you have to take into account those players that are coming back from injury. Like, we didn't have Emiliano Buendia last season, of course, and other players that are coming back into it. Tyrone Mings doesn't come until later. But if you're talking about the opener against West Ham, by the way, a game that Villa never really wins away from home. So there's that historical side of it. But I think we have to focus on two things. Number one, the Douglas Luiz exit is a massive one, because aside from what he gave in the midfield, he was also a leader in that starting 11. So him being taken out of that midfield, now you're trying to capitalize on everything that he gave Villa, which wasn't just about the simple architect-like movements, but it was also about the set pieces, of course, just a simple directional way Villa was playing, etc. So that, to me, is a major focal point. Moussa Diaby leaving as well. He struggled in the middle of that season, but at the end he did produce goals and creativity. So you're taking him out as well from that perspective. Now you have also players that are still around, that are key players, like Ezri Konsa, Ollie Watkins, and Emiliano Martinez, but they came back from major tournament competition this summer, something that didn't happen last summer, right? So Ollie Watkins, for example, hasn't seen a minute of preseason. So I'm interested to see that. However, Amadou Onana, Frankie, I think has the capability of being a major star for Aston Villa now and in the years to come. He's an absolute talent. So already we have a triangle. Unai Emery has a triangle down midfield that allows a player like Onana to really express himself. He's more physical. He's better in the air. He's bigger, obviously, but he's smart. and he's confident, and he's always talking. Any Villa fan can see in preseason, he's always talking. And that's something that Douglas Luiz did as well. So now you have Onana, who's just gone fully in. So the strength there, I like, right? That's an important part. Jacob Ramsey coming back from injury is a key one as well. Yuri Tillemans working alongside Onana, so that's a good thing. I'm intrigued about the fullback roles because I'm still, even though I have a lot of admiration for Lucas Digne and Ale Moreno, I'm not sure if that left side is completely answered for. Jadon Fellaini, of course, coming in and trying to be somebody in the squad alongside Matty Cash, who wasn't seen in the last, match of the preseason against, Costa, who, by the way, had a tremendous summer as well. So You could say that in many ways it's balanced to last season. But you're lacking a little bit of experience because Douglas Luiz has been there for a while. But now you're gaining some new emergent youth, right? And I haven't even talked about Morgan Rogers, who I think is going to be a breakout player in the entire Premier League. So I think that overall, I would say that we are beginning to see this season as a stronger unit from a depth perspective.
Yes.
But from a chemistry perspective, that's still, I think, a question yet to be answered.
Yeah, completely. And I think when Boubacar Kamara got that ACL injury back in February, Aston Villa, it really did feel like we were very fine line then, weren't we? The squad didn't quite look like it had as much depth as it needed. And suddenly you look around that squad and you think there's a lot of players in there now, aren't there? It doesn't necessarily mean the first 11's stronger per se, but definitely squad depth wise, it feels like there's a little bit more there to take on the extra Champions League games we're going to have as well.
Bouba Kamara is a great point there, Frankie. I even forgot to mention that. Yeah, his absence is huge. I would say after Emiliano Martinez and obviously Ollie Watkins's goals and stuff, I would say Bouba Kamara is one of the most important players for this squad. So his absence is definitely felt. So it's going to be intriguing how to see. And, I know that we're going to talk about it and everything, but there's a lot of worry about, can we bring another striker because we don't know about the inconsistencies, and I mean off the field inconsistencies of John Hader Duran. We all know how talented he is, but you need a striker to support Ollie Watkins. Cam Archer, can he really elevate his game? Does Villa need to go into the transfer market and get somebody? I know that there's a lot of conversations about Joao Felix and the frustration with that, but I'm actually more focused about defensively, because Aston Villa conceded 61 goals last season in the Premier League, which when you're comparing it to the other three in the Champions League, I mean, you're talking double the numbers, even more than that conceding. That's, I believe, teams like Everton conceded less than Aston Villa. That's just not good enough. So Villa really needs to be better defensively. So offensively, I think it's going to be fine. Defensively, specifically focusing on how good Onana can get going is going to be really, really important.
Yeah, completely. And I think, before this transfer window does slam shut in a few weeks' time, where would you think is like the priority position? I mean, you've mentioned defense and in attack, but do you think defense is the one area that we most need probably a little bit more depth than what we currently have?
Yeah, there's a lot of conversations about John Hader Duran, and a lot of folks have their own opinions and stuff. But at the end of the day, at this very moment, as we're speaking, he's an Aston Villa player. And he needs the support 100%, regardless of the mistakes. So it's about emulating what Unai Emery is saying. So any Villa fan should really just look at that and be like, look, at the end of the day, at this point, he is a Villa player, and he right now, alongside Cam Archer, are the backups to Ollie Watkins. So, and then offensively, I really believe Morgan Rogers is going to do some things. Jacob Ramsey's looking for a good comeback. John McGinn, we haven't mentioned, of course, being able to be more free now if Amadou Onana and Yuri Tillemans can hold that double pivot. So offensively, I'm okay there. Defensively, I think in the transfer market, even if Diego Carlos reportedly leaves, there's still a lot of spaces there left to be filled because, Pau Torres, Ezri Konsa, clearly the starting center backs. But, after that, it gets a little thinner. I like what Bogart has done in the preseason, but, I don't think he's fully ready to start a Premier League match. So I think Villa needs another center back, sooner rather than later. I believe there are conversations as well with the finer captain. And I think that, he will be able to be an option as well. But I think that you possibly two versatile center backs who can be right backs or defensive midfielders. And then after that, yeah, maybe a striker. But I think defensively, specifically in the middle of the park, is important because Tyrone Mings, it's great that he's going to come back, but we're talking about mid-September, late September, maybe. So, and again, this is a season that Villa's entering in completely brand new territory. It's Champions League football, Frankie. Like there's going to be a need to deliver midweek and in the weekends. And then when the FA Cup and the League Cup come around, there's a lot of congestion there. So there really needs to be a lot of strength at the back.
Yeah, and you've mentioned Morgan Rogers a couple of times there. He to me is my prediction of a player who breaks into the England team this season if the form continues as it did from last season and what we've seen in pre-season, and becomes a breakout star within the Premier League itself, that fans of other clubs start to go, that Morgan Rogers guy is pretty good, isn't he? I mean, it's quite clear from what you've been saying as well that you anticipate this could be a big season for Rogers.
Yeah, I have a big piece coming out for ESPN very soon about some of the players that I'm focusing on in terms of breakout stars, and he's one of them. I think that the things that we saw from Morgan Rogers, specifically sort of from April, right, where he scored consecutively 3 times at Villa Park, and they were great goals. He was beginning to understand Unai Emery's system more and more and more. He was feeling more comfortable. Every Villa fan was probably thinking to themselves, my God, this was an absolute steal here to get a player of his caliber for that price from Middlesbrough. And this is a player that's played at every single youth setup for England as well. And I'm willing to even say that if things go the way that I think will, he might even get a call-up by the senior team of England senior team. I really think that highly of him. So it all just depends, of course, about how he positions himself in this lineup. But I mean, and that really is an Unai Emery thing, because he did utilize him as a central striker every now and again in preseason. Obviously, it's not his favorite position, but he's smart enough, athletic enough, physical enough to do it. Especially if things are going on with John Hader-Duran and Ollie Watkins needs some help up top. I believe a lot in Morgan Rogers. I think he's going to have a great season.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one with Rogers. He's been playing in the front two as well in pre-season, and there's just something about his physical profile and ability that it really has struck me as somebody who could one day be the heir to Ollie Watkins. One day he actually plays as a striker, not just second striker, not just left midfield, like actually as an out-and-out striker. I'm fascinated to watch his development this season. But look, Luis Miguel, that Champions League theme is going to be playing at Villa Park this season. I just get goosebumps thinking about it.
I need to fly back, Frankie. Yeah. I need to fly back straight away. I don't know if my wife will allow it because we spent, obviously, as you know, a good year in England last year. I need to fly back. I'm just tingling thinking about it. Incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously there's more games this season as well, 8 minimum. I mean, so how do you feel about Villa going into it and how we can cope with it, really?
I think this new format helps the likes of Aston Villa. The idea that, it's no longer these many groups. It's now just one massive table. I think that allows a lot of room for options and, just going for it. And I think once again, when you have a manager like Unai Emery, who has so much experience in Europe, we obviously know what he's done in the Europa League, but also taking Villarreal to a semi-final of the Champions League, that's no easy feat. So I think that there's going to be a lot of experience there. I think a lot of lessons were learned from the Conference League as well, just overall. And remember, the Conference League was just a good example of how, depth is so important. So I think it's about balancing the squad and making sure that, they are generally ready for midweek competition, no matter who it is. I mean, I can't wait to see what kind of a position Villa is going to face in the Champions League. But I think the most important thing is to make sure, I always say this, if you want to be a successful club, it's not about a starting 11, it's about a squad. And so it's important that this squad is ready for that. And I do approve of the concept that Monchi's going with, which is obviously twofold, because part of it is, making sure that you get, like Morgan Rogers, for example, a young player for a reasonable amount of money. So Villa is clearly going a little bit younger. The average age for Villa last year, I believe, was 26. That's a little old, I think. So Villa is looking to look younger, and that's going to be important. So I think the Champions League is going to be incredible for the fact that it will be at Villa Park, the fact that Villa are going to be in it. But I think it's good that they didn't win the Conference League and they saw the obstacles that happened to go with it, because now they can see, all right, now that Villa's in the Champions League, now that we have a different squad, now that it's a little bit younger, a little bit dynamic, but also have lost a few key leaders like Douglas Luiz, now it's going to be important to see how they do there. But I think the format helps, and I think as long as that home support is there, it's good. But honestly, sometimes I feel Villa's the kind of team that does better away from home, especially in Europe, because I think Unai Emery is just so experienced. So it's all down to how Unai Emery balances the lineups between Premier League and the weekend, and then Tuesday or Wednesday for the Champions League. But my God, what a time to be alive, to the fact that, like you said, you're going to hear that anthem at Villa Park.
Yeah, I might play it on my wedding day, walking down the aisle. So don't know
You'll be divorced in no time.
Yeah, she walks straight out. Off she gets straight on a plane back to Australia. She's out of there. But yeah, so I mean, it's difficult to say at the moment, really. But what do you think success looks like for Villa this season? Do you think that now we've got into top four, and got into the Champions League for the first time in the modern era, now it sets a precedent of what Villa can actually do? Do you think Villa can get top four again this season?
Yes, of course they can. Villa can definitely get top four. But I think that there's a lot of, and as you mentioned, there needs to be an understanding of the context here and some lessons perhaps that Villa can learn from Newcastle United, right? Because, not everything is always going to be the same. But part of the reason why Villa are in the Champions League is because the campaign last season didn't really ask, or anybody outside of Villa fans expected this to happen. So there was almost, I wouldn't say there was no pressure, but there was the spotlights weren't solely, totally all on Villa the whole time. Of course, there was a lot of celebration and saying, my goodness, how good are Unai Emery's Aston Villa. They're tremendous. But now the spotlight is there. Getting to the top is one thing, but staying there is another. And I think that that's something that, the likes of somebody like Newcastle United had to learn, because obviously it's not through fault of their own trying to figure out sustainability rules, which is what Villa's had to do. So it's a realistic thing for them to do it. Now, here's the thing. Manchester City are clearly going to be the favorites once again. And then I think this is real Arsenal's moment to try and dethrone Man City and win the Premier League title. After that, Frankie, it's kind of like a free-for-all.
Yes.
I mean, Manchester United and Erik ten Hag, they've done some astute signings in the summer with Matthijs de Ligt, Mazraoui, Zerki, of course, Lenny Yoro is injured, but still, there's a bit of a deeper squad now. But they're still Manchester United, still have to try and deal how Erik ten Hag is going to do this. Tottenham and Postecoglou's system, they obviously start so well, but then, because of the physicality and the demands of a Postecoglou philosophy, often asks, what are they going to do? Dominic Solanke is a good addition, but is that enough for Tottenham? Then there's Liverpool, who haven't made one single signing as we speak. They have to now, Arne Slot has to overcompensate the shadows of Jurgen Klopp. That's not going to be easy. Chelsea with their 3,000 players in their squad, and a new manager, we'll have to see what they do. And, so to me, third and fourth place, is kind of open for a lot of teams. And I'm looking at somebody is Julen Lopetegui's West Ham going to be able to, because I've been very impressed with their transfer window. So there's a lot of teams here that can really try and fight for European spots. And in that is Aston Villa and Unai Emery, who already know what it's about. So I think absolutely you can do it. It's just that I'm hesitant to be it's going to happen, because, again, we're entering brand new territory. Aston Villa is going to be in the Champions League and dealing with the fact that they have to try and qualify for the next one as well. And that's really alien territory. So that to me is a key thing. But it's absolutely realistic that a European spot, third and fourth, can happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right about the sort of the teams below Arsenal and City. And I was looking at it yesterday and I was like, you know what? I just see a lot of teams that have lots and lots of strengths, but also lots and lots of question marks, some flaws. With Chelsea, I mean, I'm half expecting Fabrizio Romano to publish a picture of one of us saying, "Here we go, we've signed for Chelsea." I mean, I don't know. Everyone I walk past in the street, I think half think is a Chelsea player. But predictions are obviously a very dangerous territory, really. But do you have any big predictions for Villa this season?
Okay. I think that this is a season where Villa wins a trophy.
Right.
I don't yet know which one that is. I don't think it's the Champions League. But I think this is a time because I just keep going back to that very first press conference that Unai Emery said, which was, I want Champions League football and I want a trophy. Mm-hmm. So 1 out of 2 already, in such a short amount of time. And I know the makeup of Unai Emery. I know what he's about. And I know that he's obsessed with getting some silverware. So make that of you will. So I think is the FA Cup finally something that can happen? Who knows? The League Cup, which is literally the last trophy Aston Villa won, back in '96. Like, is that a thing? So, and I think if it's the FA Cup, then, is there an avenue for a European spot? And I'm not going to say at this point right now that I don't think Villa won't get top 4. It's just that I don't want any Villa fan to be disillusioned if it doesn't happen, because there's a lot that's been done in order to balance itself, in order to start again. So if Villa get 5th, 6th, like a European place, then that's a great season. But again, I'm not completely discounting that Villa can get Champions League again, because it's just such a free-for-all between 3rd and 7th, 3rd and 8th. But I do believe that this could be the season where Villa win a trophy, most likely a domestic one.
Oh, you definitely have to fly back for that, I think, if we did. Yeah, it's and as you say, the way to look at it, I think, is Unai Emery has signed his contract now till 2029. He clearly sees it as a long-term project. We've signed a lot of young players. Clearly, the vision is that a lot of these young players will use this season as get their grounding in the Premier League, get used to Aston Villa and Unai Emery, and then build from there. So it is part of a long-term process, I think. That's the way I'm choosing to look at it. And something as well I want to ask you, Ollie Watkins, can he hit that 20 goals in the Premier League?
Yes, that will happen. 100%. Yeah. It depends on how much he's used in the Champions League, which obviously will be enough. But I think that Ollie Watkins has found his form, and that historic goal in the Euros, I think has catapulted himself into not just one of the best strikers in the Premier League, but one of the best strikers in Europe. There's going to be a lot of other clubs looking at somebody like that, but he's a Villa striker right now, and I think that this is the season where he does it, because and people need to remember, he was very high up in the creativity perspective in assists and goals. But I think now, there's a lot of support players that can help Ollie Watkins score those goals instead of just creating them. I mean, people I think are underestimating. I think people are not talking enough about Emiliano Buendia's return.
Yeah.
And I think he's ready to make some noise. And I think that he's the kind of player that can be easily transitioned in, but because there's Champions League football, he's the kind of player that's really going to facilitate, the productivity for Ollie Watkins. So the answer is yes, as long as, of course, touch wood, he stays healthy, etc. But Villa fans, please, be patient, because you know what happened last season. I mean, it was a destruction against Newcastle, and then it was Champions League football at the end of it. So, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. As long as the squad remains relatively healthy, I want 1 or 2 more players to come in. I mentioned Gertruda, somebody like that, then hopefully things will go. But this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. But Villa fans will be hearing the Champions League anthem at Villa Park this season, and that's incredible.
Absolutely. Well, Luis Miguel, is always just amazing to chat to you. I love chatting football, Aston Villa, everything with you. And I'm sure most people watching this, listening to it, will already follow you. But for those who don't, where can we find you and your work?
You can find me on ESPN FC, ESPN Deportes, if you speak Spanish as well. We have a YouTube show. I do Sports Center, which is just US related, but I'm obviously on social media, Instagram. I'm on X, though I'm thinking very carefully about how long I should stay there. Threads as well. You can find me anywhere. My name is not easy to spell, but it's very unique to find, so it's fine.
Fantastic, Luis. Thank you so much for coming on, and up the Villa.
Up the Villa. Thank you, Frankie.